what if your body isn't broken? What if your body is actually incredibly wise and is always helping you to live your best life? Do you know that you could actually avoid perimenopause and menopause? Today, we have Dr. Andi Locke Mears, who is a practitioner of German New Medicine, talking to us about how we can thrive during those years of transition from menarche to being free of it. All right. Andi, thank you so much for being here on the podcast today. Folks, girls, can I just tell you about Andi from what I have learned of her and how I have been so blessed by what she is putting out in the world? She started out as a naturopath and had a burgeoning business wellness center that was just chock full, kept her super busy. And all of a sudden in 2009, she learned about German New Medicine. And from that, and Dr. Hammer's work, it transformed her world and the way she was treating people. Finally, she was seeing people not just treating symptoms, but people that were being healed, that they were experiencing healing and wholeness. And they were learning how to work with their bodies and that their body wasn't their enemy. And from that, she's been teaching for nearly 24 years, for nearly 2 decades. She's been teaching others how to apply this information to help us live a fuller and more in alignment life with our bodies. And it's just been incredible. Today, I wanted to talk with her about what is perimenopause and menopause. And from a Western perspective, we see it as women as this doom that is just has stricken us because we reach a certain age and it's unavoidable and we're going to be on meds or have surgeries done, and it's just what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. And Andi has different information that brings me so much hope and delight. And I just want to get into this conversation about what are these things. Andi, is there anything else you want to say before we dive in?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Kelly. I really appreciate this. And any opportunity I get to kind of spread the work of Dr. Hammer, I always take it because you never know who's this is going to reach, and it's going to resonate, and they're going to want to move forward and learn more, and their life will then be changed, and those around them as well. So this is the ripple that goes out. So I really appreciate your having me on your show here, first of all.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So perimenopause, you brought up a really good term. In fact, that term didn't even exist when I was a little girl. There was no such thing.
I
But
don't remember it.
it did not exist. You either were a cycling female or you were menopause. There was it. There was no like transition period. And this gets us into a much bigger discussion about our biological society. But before I get to there, let me say that sure, they're coming up with this term that says, "Oh, it's before menopause." And it's enough that when you're younger, you're like, "Oh my God, am I going to have perimenopause too?"
Mhm.
And it starts the fear. It starts the trepidation. I don't want to get older. I don't want to get older, and all of that, which is just that very slippery slope, unfortunately. So they're going to say perimenopause is that transitional time leading up to menopause where the ovaries gradually produce less estrogen and progesterone. Okay, fine. And that it happens in their women's 40s, or it could happen earlier. It's like they really don't know. And so they're looking at, you've got a skipped period, or you've got a longer cycle, a shorter cycle, you've got changes in your flow from heavy to light, hormonal fluctuations start. They're even saying in perimenopause, oh, you can have hot flashes and night sweats and mood changes and vaginal dryness and things like this. It boggles my mind that they have to come up with a term that just describes the process that we go through. Doesn't matter what the age is that you start, it's the process you go through where you're starting to solve the programs you've been running for decades, which
Mm.
is what menopause, quote, is. So let me start by saying that there are cultures around the world where there is not even a word for menopause, right? So it's like, oh, oh, well, what does that mean? What's different with those women, right? So when we look at how they live, they're living in a biological society. So indigenously, we all lived in biological societies. That started changing, 200, 1 to 200 years ago, depending on where you lived. And now industrialization came in and fragmented the family and changed working conditions and made women work outside the home. So, biological society, what does that mean? They're living in harmony with the earth. Think of them as indigenous tribes, but even more so, even in England, Scotland, they're not indigenous tribes like we think of Native American. They're people just like you and us, but they're living in small villages where everyone has a place and everyone has an identity. There's a strong family unit. That's the key right there. There's a strong family unit. So those children grow up with a community around them and lots of love for the most part. And so they develop their identity and their place, and they don't experience the conflict shocks that we now have, especially in the quote modern world in the past 100 years when we've shifted to industrialization. 130 years where we've shifted away from the family and towards you got to work. And putting women into the workplace was one of the worst things they could do because it took us away from our babies and it left them vulnerable in a way that is biological. So we're thinking, oh, well, they had daycare, they had nannies, they were fine. No, that's not what we're talking about. Biologically, if you're under 5, the one person in the world that is survival to you is your mother. If mother is gone, think of yourself as an animal in the woods. If a baby rabbit or fox doesn't have mom around, what happens to baby rabbit or fox? They get eaten. They are hardwired the same way we are. Even though we have a nanny or we're put in daycare, we're still hardwired as mom isn't here, I'm going to be eaten. And that starts biological conflict shocks. This is not psychological. This is biological. This is how we are hardwired. So under
That I just wanted to touch on that about how incredibly revolutionary that whole idea is. And honestly, if that's kind of the only takeaway that my listeners get from this about how incredibly vital motherhood is, especially, I'm going to say especially those early years, but those are the formative ones, are the ones where we have our building blocks of our beliefs about us and the world and what is safe, that this is so imperative, and how deeply I wish and I hope and I'm working on helping to change that message that women go, you know what? The most valuable thing I can do is raise my children, be there for them, create that security and love, and not be so busy that I'm shoving them in all these activities or in school or daycare or elsewhere, but I keep them with me so that they can grow up solid in their sense of security and
right.
can have a healthier sense of themselves and the world and health in general.
Yes,
Off
exactly.
to you.
Perfect. And, I look at young women now. I have a young woman in my neighborhood who just gave birth a few months ago. And she was, even before she gave birth, she was mourning the fact that she'd only have 12 weeks with her child, with her baby, that she would have to go back to work full time. And she reconciled, well, at least I'll be home one of those days. I can work virtually and be with her. It's like, okay, that's okay. And if that's how you have to rationalize it, but it's not the same thing.
Right. I'd
So
say even on that note, I mean, I before I knew any of this and I was just steeped in the norm of what this is just what you do. I worked from home,
yeah,
and yet I couldn't always have my babies with me. And so their dad would take care of them, my husband, or and even then their cries, I felt such resentment towards, like, "Ah, I'm trying, I'm the breadwinner here, I'm trying to work, I'm doing what I can, why
right.
can't you just be happy? You know what, let them cry it out in their crib." And it pains me so much to know, like, those cries were for me, that they aren't meant to lay alone in a crib. They are meant to be with us. And it really wasn't until this last pregnancy, this last baby that we've had, where I realized, like, you know what? I with me all the time, still sleeping together, still nursing, all these things, that this I get to be your sense, I get to be your bubble from the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And so wow, that even when they're like, well, but I'm still home and my baby's not in daycare, I still didn't understand.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Carry on.
Yes. You're welcome. And that's we're kind of leading up to this. So we don't live biological lives, right? We're not usually at home with our babies and living in a, we've got a husband, perhaps a partner, someone who's also there, although we have so many single women raising their children all by themselves. Again, not biological. Normally we would have generations around us. When my mother was growing up, her grandmothers lived with them. It's like that was normal, right? And so that's what we've lost, is that generational safety piece. It's not in our minds, it's in our biology. We know we're safe. We have all these generations around us. And that's what creates a place and an identity that we just don't have today. So we've got women in coming up, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and they've been raised in this very non-biological way. And now they're approaching, and I should say they've had biological conflict shocks since they were very young. And usually by the time they are 5, they have several. And usually by the time they're 6 or 7 or 8, they have what we call is a sexual frustration conflict. Now, this is not about sex. It's like the worst title Dr. Hammer could have given this particular one, but all right, good enough. You can be an embryo and have a sexual frustration conflict. So this is not about sex, but it is about feeling safe and secure as a female. That's what it's about. So if daddy, who is your first male love, pushes you away, you're showing a piece of artwork to him and he pushes you away, that's a sexual frustration conflict. Right then, daddy pushed you away. He is the protector, right? He is the strongest person in that household. Biologically, that's what men have always done. They've been the protectors and the defenders. Well, that hasn't gone away, even though we emasculate them all the time. And it's harder for them to do that because we've taken on the male role. We don't need them like we did centuries ago. And sure, there's women who are like, yeah, I don't need a man. It's true. We don't. We can make our own money. But what does that do for the men? And what does that do to us?
Mhm.
It emasculates them. They literally have a territorial conflict on their right hemisphere, which lowers their testosterone. We now have more female men and who are not able to even provide or protect their family. And we have women who are the breadwinners who are out there. They're doing all the work that the men do. It doesn't look like it did hundreds of years ago, right? We don't have villages coming in, cavemen or whatever, invading us. We don't have that in our culture, at least. So it doesn't look the same, but we're still hardwired that way. All right. So we've got younger women coming along. They've had their sexual frustration conflict probably from the time they were about 5 or 6 or 7 years old. If they're a right dominant female, so they're more right-handed, then you would have your period at 11. If you did not have your first menses at 11, that means you had a sexual frustration conflict when you were younger. In order to have your period, you had to have a second sexual frustration conflict. That's around 12, 13, 14, 15 when, oh, you really liked, that boy next door and you really had the hots for him and he was really cool and he looked at you occasionally and you got all, giddy and everything and then you saw that he was with another girl. There's your second sexual frustration conflict. It's about more an adult with hormones, it's more about, is he the right one for me? Is he the one I can have children with? Which is what we're always looking for, even though it's not in our conscious mind to do that necessarily. Because we're the breadwinner, we've got our college degree, we're out there, we have a career. That's our focus. But biologically, you're still looking for Mr. Right. All right? So we have that going on. And so you have your period at whatever, 13, 14, 15, when you have that second sexual frustration conflict. For left-handers, it's a little bit different because of how hormones shift because of the sexual frustration conflict, which is in the left temporal lobe. So let me just explain on our cerebral cortex. We have 5 relays on the side here that are very important. They are what govern our relationships, our communication, and our hormones, our estrogen and our testosterone. They're all linked together. And they're called our territory because our territory is where we live. For females, our territory is that place where we feel safe and secure. For a male, their territory is the things that they acquire, their job, their woman, their children, their land. It's what they're going to protect and defend. So again, this is not psychology here. This is what's inherent in us. We all have hierarchies in our life. The hierarchy of biological societies was pretty basic. You know, you grow up, you're safe, you get older, you take over new roles in the community and so on. Now it's not like that. We have so many different hierarchies that we live in, and we change hats all the time, and it's very schizophrenic.
Mm.
Our lives are very schizophrenic, and they're fragmented. We're one person with our parents, we're a different person with our children, we're a different person at work, we're a different person when we go to church. And that's not how we're meant to be.
Mm.
So where was I? So yeah, so we are raised this way. So like I said, we've got the women 20s, 30s, and 40s who were raised this way. And they don't know anything different. They think this is they're a great female. They're doing the feminist thing. They think this is great. And that's what society tells them. That's what the narrative is. That to be successful, you're going to have your career, your 2.3 children and your husband and whatever. So now we start realizing we have many conflict shocks. And in the territory, if you have your first one when you're 6 or so, it decreases your estrogen, which is why you don't have your period at 11. To
Mm.
get your period back, you have to have a second one that impacts on the right side. That lowers testosterone and increases, in some ways, your estrogen then begins to climb in relation to that testosterone, and that's when you get your period. So imagine we have that sexual frustration one. We normally have 2 of them, and there's one on each side. And we have several more conflicts in the territory, and those determine our personality. They determine our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions, all of that. It's all our territorial constellations and conflicts. Constellation is when we have one in each hemisphere, and now we're constellated. So we can ping back and forth between being that driven woman who's sporty and going after, goals, and that's very male. And that is when you have a conflict in your left temporal lobe. Versus if you have a conflict in your right temporal lobe and you're a male, you are now losing testosterone and you're becoming a little softer and more female. You do want to talk about your feelings like a woman. So, okay, so back to our women who are being raised this way, and they've got several territorial conflicts, constellations, raising their estrogen, lowering or raising their testosterone, and they're vacillating back and forth, which means they might have symptoms that are more so. They've got cramping with their periods. They have a heavier discharge. They have changes in their cycle. Sometimes it's 24 days. Sometimes it's 32 days. All of this indicates that you've got territorial constellations running, that you're changing your hormone status on a regular basis. So because we have changes in our menstrual cycle, we know that, okay, eventually when you start to solve these as you get older and you're starting to get out of your childbearing years, which is normal, that's natural. We do go through, every culture has a change where we're not giving birth at 80, we do give birth when we're younger. And so we do go through this change. Like I said, in some cultures, it's simply, it turns off. They no longer have a period. There are no symptoms. If there are no conflicts in the territory, that's what happens. And you look at us now, and we're starting to have menopausal symptoms in our late 30s, in our 40s. That is when you're starting to go through these changes that occur because, so from a GHK, Gemenische Heilkunde perspective, what is menopause? And let me read to you the definition that Dr. Hammer said it was, because it's just very simple. He said menopause is a natural process in a woman's life and should not be considered a disease. It is a biological change caused by the loss of ovarian function and the resulting hormone deficiency. That's it. So, our individual conflict shocks and the programs that we've run throughout our life determine our quote menopausal symptoms. Like I said, if you don't have any of these premenopausal symptoms, there's no territorial conflicts, and there's no change in your ovary or your uterine lining programs, then it's simply it turns off and you no longer have a period and there are no symptoms. And so what happens in this process is that these programs that we've turned on become irrelevant because we're starting to shift from that female perspective of having our babies to a more male perspective, which is how we are in menopause. We don't become men. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we shift from that drive to have our babies to a drive to not have the babies, and it's a shift to a more male perspective. And in this process, we resolve these conflicts that we've been running, these programs we've been running for decades, especially when we had our first sexual frustration conflict at 6. We've been running this a long time. We're now in our mid 40s, and now our cycle's getting even more irregular than it was. Or we're starting to think, God, am I having a hot flash? What's wrong with me? I'm only 45 or whatever. And so this process we go through that naturally solves all of these programs we've been running takes us years. And it should just be 3 months. It's a 3-month shift if our hormones are normal and balanced throughout our life. If they're not, then it can take us years to finish these programs, and it happens whether we want it to or not. So we actually want to go through this process because we want to finish these so we can get to the next phase of our life where we're not governed by our hormones as much as we have been through our cycling years. Does that all make sense,
Oh,
Kathy?
yeah, yeah. I have a question. And going back to, so say this woman has been, this woman, I could be pointing exactly to myself, has been, focused like a man on very career. This is my plan. I am charging through life. This is it. And then all of a sudden in her mid 30s, she says, I haven't had kids yet. Is
Mhm.
that kind of what does that show up? How is that sounds like a conflict to me of then this person is now they're trying and they're struggling. I guess that's more like a fertility issue, but even like what comes up with them, how would that affect their cycle and what's coming up? Because then that's when doctors love to say, oh well, now I mean your egg quality is terrible, and then it
Right,
raises
right.
all these yeah. So talk to me.
Yeah, good point. So when women get into like the fertility issues, when they realize their clock is ticking, right? And they've already had 2 decades of running these programs that have changed their cycle, changed the amount of estrogen they have. And so every month they're stepping on tracks that are changing their hormone status, their hormone profile. And now they think, oh, I'm just going to go get pregnant. And some women can. If they're balanced enough, they can. And other women who are not as balanced, then it is tougher. So we have to look at the programs that are running. If they've been running an ovarian program, that's a loss conflict. Let's say maybe they were pregnant when they were younger and they terminated it or had a miscarriage and they mourned that. Or a loss conflict that in that every time they broke up with a boyfriend or boyfriend broke up with them, it was the loss of that relationship, which was a loss of the potential of having babies from a biological standpoint. So loss conflicts. So it's a loss of the ovary. The cells in the ovary start to decrease. And when that happens, that makes our cycles much longer because we don't have the estrogen anymore. Our ovaries make estrogen. If we lose our estrogen, our cycle gets longer and longer. And then we have in the healing phase, let's say we resolve it. Oh, now we have another boyfriend. Yay! So another potential to have a baby, even though that's not necessarily in our consciousness, but it
Mhm.
is biologically. And so now you solve that lost conflict, and now you have an ovarian cyst. And that would be the healing phase. That was normal and natural. That's perfect because what does that do? It raises your estrogen. Woo! So now you're in a better position to get pregnant. Let's say you had surgery instead, you had your ovary taken out. And so we go through these slippery slopes of all the things that the medical community does to us. And I'm not saying don't have surgery, I'm saying understand what's going on and why. There is a time to have surgery with that and a time not to. That's important to understand. That's just the ovarian program. If we're looking at the uterine lining program, it's a much more primitive. It's a brainstem program, so that's all about just reproduction of the species, basically, reproduction of us, survival. It's all survival stuff, and that is definitely going to be a pregnancy type, a procreation type of conflict. Well, he's not performing this month, so therefore, it could be a uterine lining program that's running. So now you've got a thickening of your uterine lining, and now you're starting to have periods that are thick clots instead of just the red, fairly fresh blood that it should be. A regular period would be, but if it's darker, it's thicker, and it's uncomfortable, super heavy, and you're just going through pad after pad after pad, it's like, okay, there's a program running here. All of these change your biology in the moment. And it's not like you have them for a day and they're over. Oftentimes, we trip on them year after year after year. And then we get to our 30s and we wonder why we can't get pregnant. So if somebody's having fertility issues, it's like, okay, this is perfect knowledge to know because then you can start finding biological solutions to your programs that are running. And then you can get pregnant without needing to deal with fertility, folks.
Andy, how does someone go about finding that information? Like how, so someone says, yeah, I am struggling with fertility, or I don't care about getting pregnant, but I am having all of these menopause or perimenopause symptoms. How do I figure out what's going on with me, what my conflicts are? How do I create resolution? And what does that look like?
Super. So Dr. Hammer said that the therapy is in the knowledge. In other words, what you do about your issues is in the knowledge. You have to learn this. This is not hard. There's really, truly, it's not that hard. I have a basic course that is for anyone. I've got kids who take it, and so anybody can take this. And the thing is, too, is that people think, well, I'm just going to go buy a book and read about it. And that's great. Go for it. Do it. But you cannot learn this knowledge from a book or a video or a podcast. You can't. Even
How
if
come?
you can't, because it's such an entirely different paradigm. And I have really educated people. There are really good educated people in the holistic world who are like, I'm just going to learn this from books and podcasts. And they can't figure it out. And they come out saying, oh, yeah, GNM, GHK, yeah, it's wrong because of this. And that's because they don't understand it, because they didn't learn it from a person. Because you're going to come into this with the framework of knowledge you have, whether it's medical or allopathic, or holistic or energy medicine. You're going to come in with a framework of knowledge, and you're going to try to make this fit into that, and you can't. You have to take all of that and put it aside and learn everything brand new. And people don't know how to do that. Even though people are listening to this saying, well, I can do that. Well, I'm sorry, you can't. I know you try. People try, and really educated people try, and they can't. So you have to have live interaction. You have to talk through this with somebody. So one of the biggest questions I have is the one you just asked. Well, how do I find a biological solution? What does that even mean? And this is where, okay, we have 8 billion people on the planet. There are 8 billion solutions. And so people are like, well, what the heck does that mean? So it means that you are an individual. The programs that you're running and the intensity that you're running them, you are the only one person on this planet that does it like you do. So what we help you to do is different than what I help the next woman do. So there's no one size fits all answer. In other words, oh, well, if you just take this herb and meditate at 8 o'clock every morning, then you're going to be fine. It doesn't work like that. We have to find out what your conflict shocks are all about. What happened in your life? Because what happened in your life is what happens, is different from what happens in every other woman's life, every other person's life. And from your biological programs, we have to then develop a biological solution, which is often you do the opposite. So, an example I'll give you, and this is from Dr. Hammer, is that when women would come to him in their 20s, well, I've got this going on, my periods are so heavy, and I've got this, and I can't sleep, and I've got fatigue, and I'm single or not, and I can't, I can't live my life. I'm in so much pain and yada yada yada. The answer he usually gave them was have a baby. And those of us who are raised in our modern world are like, are you crazy? That's so primitive. It's like, how is having a baby? It's like, I don't feel, the women will say to me, I'm not equipped to bring a baby into the world. Actually, you need a baby in order to solve your programs that are running. So all those belief systems you've built up about yourself on how you're not ready or this world isn't good enough, I'm not going to bring a baby into this world, all of that is because of your programs that you're running. It's your rationalization, which is normal. We do that. I know that. But what your biology needs, what your psyche, brain, and organ need, are to go through 9 months of pregnancy. Because if you can go through 9 months of pregnancy, in the first trimester, you're conflict active. In the second two, you are in vagatonia, which means you are solving programs. If you want to get rid of these programs, get into 6 months of vagatonia. The only way to do that is to get pregnant. And then you'll have a baby. And then you know what? Your focus, you have an identity and you have a place now, which you didn't before, which was one of your issues.
That is beautiful. And wait, I want you to finish your thought before I go.
Yeah, no, and so when women hear that, like, if they understand Ganesha Heilkunde to a perspective, they're like, oh, okay, that's what I have to do. And so, we're very encouraging. Yes, go find a man and literally get pregnant. Hopefully, you can find someone you can live with and you love. And there are sometimes because I do CT scan readings with the physician that we have, and so it's just fascinating to watch because we work with women all over the world. And when I look at these women who are, well, I'm a lesbian. How am I going to do that? You know, literally. And so it's like we talk them through how to do this and do it so that they're honoring themselves and they're honoring their biology as well. There are ways to do this. So it's just fascinating to see the pushback. And it's like, are you crazy? And then once they understand why we're saying that, it's like, oh, okay, it is a solution. So
So with that, if someone is in menopause though, or like the allopathic term of what menopause is, the working through of these conflicts, the resolution of them over the time, and they're struggling for years, how, like you said, they need to talk with someone. They need to be able to talk through and
yeah,
say like, well, this is what's going on. These are the quote unquote symptoms of what's happening. And then a practitioner is able to say, so tell me about, okay, you're having super long um, menstrual periods.
but
Okay, tell me what's happening. Go ahead.
periods or cycles.
The cycles.
Okay.
It really doesn't matter, like
Yeah.
whatever it is
It's
that
a
they're
long,
able.
long cycle with lots of clots and things like that. So yes.
yeah, that they're able to just to talk and be like, okay, well then tell me about what's going on here. And then they say like, and I'm also having hot flashes. Okay, what is it? Can you speak into hot flashes? What is going on in the
Yes.
body?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so that's I'm so glad you asked me that because so I'm just gonna say, Dr. Hammer, bless his heart for all that he gave us, right? And I'm also gonna say he was a guy and he's not a woman. And so he's gonna look at this. I mean, nothing bad about him. He was an amazing, amazing man. And we are going through menopause, and yes, we do need to work through this. And so, figuring out what causes the hot flashes, what program is that's in resolution, is something that we're starting to work on that. I'm actually heading up a clinical study to track women who are having hot flashes, and we're looking at it from a GHK perspective. There's a potential of like 3 programs, and so it could be the hypothalamus program in that you feel like and that's when you're not sleeping well at night, which is super common as well. And this is just when you feel like it's a complete self abandonment, a resignation of things in your life. It's your hypothalamus, and that is determining, temperatures in your body. Maybe it's a self devaluation program that you've been devalued. Most of us have had this, in much of our life, or at least a part of your life. If you've ever had a sore shoulder, a sore knee, anything like that, you've had a self devaluation. And it's also the blood vessel program. So, blood vessels are what move our blood. So, they expand, and suddenly we get a rush that's a hot flash. And that's a self devaluation. So perhaps we're stepping on a little track. That thought I just had a minute ago, and now I have a hot flash, is linked to what I thought a minute ago, stepping on a track. But I'm in that in between phase. I'm starting to switch programs off. And so I'm looking, biologically, your body's experiencing that thought you just had, which you've had all your life, that I'm just not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, whatever it is. And now you have it, and now you have a hot flash because now you're solving that. Or perhaps it's a dermis program, which is where our sweat glands are. They're lodged in our dermis, which is under our epidermis. And perhaps that's like an attack conflict. Somebody's insulting you. Your neighbor yells at you and you feel like you're attacked. And that's when you'd have a hot flash there, or a thought. Every time you think about your neighbor yelling at you, you now have a hot flash. Maybe it's that program. So we're trying to figure that out. And there might be some others there that we haven't thought of yet that we're going to see if we can figure out. So we're working with a woman who knows how to do clinical studies. She's amazing. And so we're literally putting it together, and we're getting results in. So it's going to be a while. We need more women though who are willing to go through this. Women who both know GHK and don't know GHK. So we need that control group that we're going to be putting together as well. So any women are listening to this, please reach out, and we'll put you in touch with the clinical study. And yeah, we'd love to have 100 women doing this. That would be fabulous.
Oh, I love that. And yes, I will make sure that that information gets out. And it reminds me, I recently had a conversation with a friend who is in her menopausal period, and she said, I don't experience anything but this one particular symptom. Like everything else has been wonderful, but through our conversation, what came up was her identification as a mother, that she was so solid in her motherhood and in who she was. Like she was solid in her personal identity,
Yep.
and also in like, so I know who I am as a woman. I also know who I am as a mother. And this is my number one job that I care so much about. And she's like, I don't get what everybody's going on about. I said, I think it's because of what you've got figured out, and
Yes.
that's you being able to do that. But like, what you said about us being fragmented and being schizophrenic with wearing all of we just pride ourselves in all the different hats we wear, how busy we are, all the things we're
Right.
doing, and here I am in this. And it never occurred to me about how, oh, I'm on the board for this, and then I do this, and then I go and do this for my kids thing, and then I show up here this way for someone and this way, and then who I am, well, actually I have no idea who I really am because I don't have time to
Right.
have
Right.
experienced that with myself.
Right.
And wow, how I mean it is incredibly counterculture because to
It,
be at peace with ourselves, it sounds like we really need to return to biology.
we really, really do. Yes, we really do.
Uh, yeah, and I think a huge part of that is creating a strong current in the culture of saying, "Girls, it's okay. Take a step back.
Yeah.
Take a step back and get happy. Get
And
happy doing what you were designed so beautifully to do that nobody else can do but you."
nobody else can do it.
Right. And when you really connect with it, like what I truly experienced was when I allowed myself to enjoy and embrace motherhood and say, "You know what? I'm I'm changing my phone number. I'm taking my website down. I'm unavailable for, being the workhorse that I was so driven to be. And look how fancy and important and valuable I am as a person." And said, "You know what? Mm-mm. I am staying home with my kids, raising them, and I'm going to have as many babies as I feel like, as many that can come to me." And that sense of contentment. I feel like I had to go into multiple years of healing of just restoring my system, even though like from a healing perspective, like that shift, that decision making can turn programs off, right? Once you get and you say, "You know what? No, my identity is not that. My identity is this," and
There you
I
go.
claim it and I proclaim it, and yeah, that's my reality now.
Right. Oh, I love that, Kelly. I wish every woman did that. I wish we were raised with knowing to do that.
Oh, and on that, so my daughter is very much in this world. We see someone coming, all of the attributes that they have, and go, "Wow, that girl, she's set up for success. Look, wow, world, here she comes. What's she gonna do in it?" She's really accomplishing a lot, and who she's showing up in the world as is really is admirable. And I was sharing this with a gentleman, and saying like, "Oh, this is what she's doing out in the work world right now." And he said, "Wow, that's pretty amazing. So what does she want to do when she grows up?" And I said, "She wants to have 12 kids, live on a farm with animals." And I said that with great pride.
Yeah.
And he said, "What a waste of potential." Like that was his knee-jerk reaction. I
Yeah.
wanted to punch the man
Yes.
because and my comeback was, and there he was standing there with his wife and son, and who she works outside the home.
Yep.
He, I'm sure, has been in daycare forever until he went to school and is doing all of that traditional,
Yep.
what we do these days. And I said, "Actually, the world needs more moms that raise their kids. They
Yeah.
need more moms to stay home and love their kids and not just ship them off to daycare and
Right.
have the schools raise them." So
Right.
I'm really proud of her.
Oh
But
my
I
God.
tell you, I wanted to make a podcast right then and there. Like,
Oh,
wow,
totally.
let me tell you.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Totally support that podcast. There's I read a lot of historical fiction. Just, it's fascinating to me, and I always think, well, maybe I had a past life back then. Well, that's why it's fascinating to me.
Ooh, what era? What era do you love to be in?
Oh man, I've been reading like it's about 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, early, and you look at the things like in Troy, the Trojan horse, all that stuff. That time period is too, and it's escaping me when that was, but it was a long time ago. Fascinating to me. But I also look at like England, 1800s, 1700s. I look at that 1600s. All it's also fascinating to me. And I look at how the women are. So we look at that, and we think back to history, and we think, oh well, these women are all suppressed, right? They have to have a role, and they want to all work outside the house. Well, they didn't, but and so I think what I want to point out to your folks here is that we're not saying that women have to go back to being like it was in historical fiction, where there's a protagonist and now she's abused or whatever and stuff. Or we're not going to go back to the 1950s when you're going to vacuum in your heels and your dress and your pearls. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about an entirely new kind of society where women establish their identity young, they know who they are young, they have their babies young, and then if they want to go have a career and climb the corporate ladder when they're older, go for it. That you can have it all, but not in the way that you think you can have it all now, because you can't have it all. If you think you can have it all now, you can't. There's always something that's going to lose, and it's going to be your children. It will. So I want to say that right away because our kids are not raised in a biological society anyway anymore. I was going to say something else too. It'll come back to me with the historical fiction. Yeah, and that we're not going to go back to the 1950s. Oh, so I was at the Weston Price conference that I do every year. I have a booth there, and last year this woman came around. She was probably in her late 40s, and she was listening to the things I was saying, and I was talking biological like this, and when everybody left the table, she said, well, my 17-year-old daughter, all she wants to do is get married right now and have a baby. And she was literally like whispering this to me. And this is Weston Price, where you can pretty much, this is all, we're all about biology there for the most part. It's safe. And she was like, and I was like, oh my God, that's fabulous. 17 is the perfect age to have a baby because that's when we are at our fertilist and we have the energy to raise a child, to raise many children starting then, especially when we have the support like we've had for centuries of our family and our community. So I encouraged her. I said, "This is fabulous. This is wonderful." And so I was encouraging, and she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how is this going to work? And what kind of pushback is she getting?" "Oh, yeah, everybody thinks she's crazy. That she's throwing her life away." It's like, "Oh my God." It's just the opposite. When you don't do that, you're almost throwing your life away, but throwing away a part that you'll never get back, let's just say. And so they have property, the parents have property, they're building a house on the property for the child, for her daughter and her, who will be the son-in-law soon. I'm sure by now they're married and maybe she's even pregnant by now. So, and they're in high school. These are high schoolers saying, we want to get married and have babies. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened in those young lives that made them realize their biological potential? And I'm not
Oh.
saying that she can't go on to get an education and have a career. She can, if she chooses to do that when her children are younger. That's fine. Have them when you're young if you can.
I think what you're saying I'm just reminded of the self versus the mother in the way of like we are built to be nurturers, but we are encouraged as women to be all about self. That, well, what about my career? What about what I want? I want to travel, right? I
Right,
also think that that's a big fat lie that no, you need to go out in the world and you need to experience all these things. Like, isn't that lovely? That's great. Is that a biological need to traverse to unknown locales? Like, I don't like, no, I think we're being programmed that we need to just be off and have our selfish years of, for 15 years of just figuring out who we are. Like, oh my
right,
Lord, we
right,
should know by when we were 10, we should know who we are.
right,
And when we're 11, and we should be settled and feel like because it's valuable, it is the
right,
most valuable thing we can contribute the experience of being a mother when you are feeling when you do have that protector and that provider around you the way we are designed to be.
right,
There is nothing that I have ever experienced in life, and I've gotten to travel and I've gotten to have career accolades and all of the things. Nothing has compared to the feeling of being so in sync with my motherhood, with my babies, my children, being surrounded by them. I have never, in a corporate environment or in any kind of award ceremony, felt that sense of I am good that I feel as a mom. And I mean, that's not like women who struggle with fertility. It's not to say you are wrong and bad and broken. but it is to say, girls, we are missing out because of the lies.
Right.
And yeah,
Right.
so I do think traveling is really fun.
Yeah.
I don't think that you have been robbed if you don't do that yet. If you wait until you're older, when you probably will have money to do that. Like,
Yeah.
you're
Exactly.
young. You don't have anything. You don't have two pennies rubbed together. Why are you trying to go to Bali? Like, I don't know.
Ye- That's a really good point. Absolutely. So I want to say, and I love what you just said, Kelly, because that's that you've embraced your motherhood so much, and that is fulfilling, and it is fulfilling on all those incredibly deep levels. The way that a career is just never that fulfilling in the same way. It can be fulfilling, but not in the same way. And I want to point that out. I also want to say to any of the women listening to this who are maybe in their late 20s up to their late 30s who are listening to this who have never had children, I want to say you are not bad and not wrong. We are not making you bad or wrong. You are a product of our society. And so embrace that, and know that you're okay just the way you are. And you're going to, at some point go through menopause. It's your choice if you have children younger or not. And it's fine if you do. And it's also fine if you don't, because, you know, there's got to be space for that as well. Not everyone will embrace being a mother and wants to be a mother. And I get that. And I'm also going to say that's because your biological conflicts that are running. And again, that's not wrong or bad. This is survival. You have these reasons, you have these programs running for survival. They're not bad, they're not wrong. You're not bad, you're not wrong. So I want to put that out there. I've got
Thank you.
plenty of young women who in my life who are career oriented, and whether they had their children or not, that's they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be bad, and they shouldn't be. This is, again, this is biology. You're running the programs you're running for survival issues.
Absolutely.
There's no
It
blame.
it
There's
it
no
helps to explain why we're dealing with the symptoms that we're dealing with. And yes, I love that you are able to help women to come to resolution or to come to at least be able to understand it so it doesn't feel like now I have this label PCOS, endometriosis,
right.
ovarian cancer, whatever it is, all these different things that sound big, scary, and put us into a shock and a conflict in that already when it's like, you know what? You're just living life and
Yeah.
your story is your story and
Right.
here it is showing up through your biology. And
Right.
it is okay. And yes, I love that we have all the freedom to make the choices.
Yes.
What hurts my heart is that we don't know this information is not taught to us. Um, period, for one, or
Exactly.
but particularly when we are young, when we this is info that then from a young standpoint, and again, if we had been raised in a way that we felt safe and protected and we felt like we could be in our feminine and that it was a good thing and that was a beautiful wonderful thing and we wouldn't be conflicted, but it's the life that we have. But
Yeah.
it's so wonderful to have this information now and we get to say, what do I
Right.
want to do with it? If
Exactly.
so, yes. And that's why I love you have all those courses and that you have so many resources. And please feel free if you wanted to wrap up anything that you were going to say, but then share with us, how can my ladies find out more information? How can they educate themselves further? And you have so many offerings provided.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, I have the basic foundational course called Beyond Holistic Medicine. And what's wonderful about that course is that I do 6 hours of live interaction with my students every month.
Oh
So
my gosh.
nobody else does that, but this is why it's so important to think, if you're just reading a book and thinking you're understanding it, you're not. You've got to have live interaction. So I do 6 hours every month. And so that gives people a firm foundation. They often go through it many, many times because you're shifting everything you know in your life about yourself and about health and about your body.
Mhm.
And I'm helping you along every step of that direction there. Then I have an advanced Beyond Holistic, which is more for if you really want to understand more ins and outs, finding biological solutions, all the patterns that are inherent in GHK, things like that. And then I have My big course is the Psychoses and Constellations course. And there's nothing else like it in English. It's fabulous. And I include Dr. Hammer's material, Helmut Pilhar's material, and another person's material who is a physician who I can't name, but his material is in that as well. So these three great men, I've compiled their information into a fabulous course that teaches you all about mental illness, mood disorders, and behavioral issues. Basically, everything you think, say, and do is you learn in the psychoses. In the basic course, you learn physical stuff, but psychoses and constellations is all about the other parts of who we are. Then I have my other last course is for people who are wanting to use this as a professional person and use it with clients. And how do we use Gemanische Heilkunde with clients? That's my GHK for Professionals course.
Lovely. And you have lots of monthly offerings for for
Yes.
the average casual learner.
Average person. So for like $16, you can join the Applied GHK class, which the content of that changes every time. And I've done a whole bunch on teeth and dental issues. Right now, I'm doing menstrual, and I've done live consults, all different kinds of material. So sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get the information on that. And I do that class every 3 weeks. $16 an hour. It's a bargain. Anybody can join in.
You also have small group sessions, which it's capped
Yeah.
at 6 students, and it's how long is that? Tell me a little more about that one.
Right. So I have a care team. I've got some women who are helping me because we can't do this alone. And so they lead two small groups, and it's 2 sessions a month that are 2 hours each. So it's 4 hours of assistance. And it's a small group where they're really talking through it a lot. It's incredibly valuable because when you see, oh, there's a woman who's got the same program that's running that I have, and now there's a connection there, and now you're figuring all it out together. So yeah, that's the small groups are wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I love especially that you have so many entry points to it. So many times when we want to learn something, someone says, "Well, I have my flagship course and it's this
Right.
huge investment
Huge.
and time." And you're like, "Well, I mean, I'm yeah." But being able to just hop in and see like, "Oh, yeah, I did tune into your last workshop, the one where you can hop in just for $16 for an hour. It was incredible talking about menstrual cycles and it was you did such a fabulous job doing the overview and then starting to address questions. It was just so eye-opening of helping us to understand our bodies. A lot of stuff that we briefly went over in 6th grade in health
Right,
class, but
right,
it was like didn't really understand how it all worked together. So, yeah.
right.
Ladies, I'm so excited to link all of that, all of those links and information to Dr. Andi Locke Mears' website and offerings. She's also on Facebook and Instagram. You just look her up, and Dr. Andi Locke Mears, and we'll have links for that below too. Andi, thank you so much for your time, for sharing. This was so valuable. I learned a lot, and it is so wonderful to know that I don't have to be afraid of perimenopause or menopause. And
No, not at
yeah.
all. Not at all. There's lots of support out there. And once you understand what's going on and why, it just calms you in a way that nothing else can. So if you're experiencing any sort of symptoms, learn about yourself. And when you do, you're going to have a new understanding and your experience then may change. So thank you, Kelly, so much for having me on. This has been absolutely delightful.
Joy. Thank you, Andi.
Thank you. Take care.